This is an astronomy book from 1896, and I want to show you guys a few things in it because I think you will be shocked at how much things have changed and how standard the firmament flat earth model actually was up until the conception of NASA. And you can see it listed here as a required piece of literature for a literary and scientific circle in 1878. And the author was the director of the Chamberlain Observatory at the University of Denver. The very first thing in the book is Psalms 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. A few pages in is this poem that I love. Perchance that thou with cloudless vision slowly sweeping up the mighty nave that cleaves the galaxy, God's visible tabernacle in the skies, star-built from shining undercroft to dome, past pillared pomp of worlds and columns wrought with fair entangle of amethyst and pearl, through jacinth portals hung with mist of stars and fiery fringe of suns, mayst come at last even to the chancel of the universe, and so throw glories veiled and far. Behold, the choral stars that sang so loud and sweet on the first morning when creation sprang, in dewy beauty from Jehovah's hand. Mayhap that thou, with swiftness unconceived, wilt overtake the light and see the things that have been and that shall be nevermore, follow the dying star in her swift flight, athwart eternity track the lost world, that drifting past our ken still gleameth fair upon the confines of some far-off realm. Perchance the star which first spake peace to men will dawn through thee upon the waiting earth. And O far-seeing eye, God's eye, perchance mayst thou reveal the city beautiful, which lies foursquare in midst of heaven, whose shining walls are of fair jasper builded and pure gold, whose battlements are crystal, and whose ways are sapphire paven, and whose gates are pearl. And if anybody's not catching it, this is referring to Jerusalem. The earth must also be in the center of the celestial sphere, for if it were nearer to the eastern portion of the heavens than to the western, the stars in the east would seem to move with greater rapidity than those in the west. Since the stars sweep across the sky each day at a perfectly regular rate, the earth must be equally distant from all of them, and thus in the center of the universe. A lot of these antique books, when they say celestial sphere, they're actually talking about the firmament. You'll see that as we go. They keep mentioning that Polaris, the North Star, is at the center of the celestial sphere or the firmament. That's also what they're referring to when they said God's visible sky tabernacle. In order to get an accurate notion of measurement by degrees, imagine the stars are fastened upon the inner surface of a huge celestial sphere, the distance from the earth to the surface of the sphere as to be beyond adequate comprehension. So here we have fixed stars. And if you've ever seen my content, this is partially where I got the idea about God's eye in the sky, because I started to pick up on it in scripture and then I found this book. So for all our naked eye observations, we may therefore assume that the eye of the observer, this phrase is often what they use to refer to God's eye or like Polaris, is located in the center of the celestial sphere, and that all of the fixed stars are fastened to the sphere, turning with it as it turns. We are thus taken back to the crystal spheres studded with golden nails with which the ancient Greeks dealt. We may imagine the moon, the planets, and comets to be likewise located on the inner surface of the sphere, but to be endowed with powers of locomotion so that they can move about among the golden nails. Remembering then that we are in the center of the celestial sphere, we ask the question, how does the star sphere appear to turn? In answering this, we have recourse to the cause of the apparent turning, which is the spinning of the earth upon its axis with such evenness of motion that we experience no jar or shock. Conceive the axis of the earth to be prolonged till it strikes the celestial sphere, the axis mundi or the world tree. The north end of the axis strikes near Polaris at a point called the north celestial pole. The south end strikes at the opposite point of the celestial sphere called the south celestial pole. The star sphere appears to turn once a day about an axis drawn from the observer's eye to the north celestial pole, which is in the vicinity of Polaris. Look how the floor of heaven is thick, inlaid with patines of bright gold. There's not the smallest orb which thou beholdest, but in his motion like an angel sings, still choiring to the young-eyed cherubims. See the sun? God's crest upon his azure shield the heavens. I mentioned this in past videos, but I do believe that the sun is actually God's tabernacle, so Polaris. Essentially that the sun that David talks about is different than the sun that God talks about creating in Genesis, like how it says that God shines like the sun. Do you get what I'm getting at? And a crest upon a shield, this is like a coat of arms with a thing in the middle, like on top, which is exactly what I believe the throne room is, Polaris. So it talks about all the functions of the sun. We're used to hearing these things about the sun, like that we know as the sun, but I personally believe that all of those qualities actually come from the throne room. But that's just me. The energy of the sunbeams were stored ages ago in primeval forests. The forests were overwhelmed by the mighty deep and buried in a sepulchre of stone. Today, men dig up the mummified sunbeams and burn them in their furnaces and fireplaces. The genial light of the great fire is due to those ancient sunbeams which are now released from their prison house. The flying locomotive, beneath whose impetuous rush the earth trembles, gets its speed from the sunbeams. If an observer makes a drawing showing the positions of the spots on the solar disk and looks at them again in a day or two, he sees that they have moved. A watch of a few days will convince him that they are being carried around at a pretty regular rate and that the sun, like the earth, turns on an axis, making a complete rotation in 3 weeks and a half. When a large spot is on the edge of the sun's disk, one may see that it makes a slight notch in the sun's limb, as the edge of the disk is called. Therefore, the spot must be a depression below the grayish-white surface of the sun. The shape of the spot is like that of a dinner plate, the bottom of the plate corresponding to the umbra and the gently sloping rim to the penumbra. So these are prominences off of the sun. Is it just me, or does this kind of look like wheat? I personally think that when this talks about Earth, it's talking about the firmament. Mother Earth is actually the spirit of the firmament in mythology. Most of the dark hemisphere of the moon is also visible. The Earth plays the part of a mirror and reflects back a portion of the sunlight which it receives. Some of this reflected sunlight lights up the dark side of the moon so that we can see it. A resemblance to terrestrial seas and continents, and say that the moon exhibits a reflection of the Earth as though it were a mirror. In the minds of many, a human figure is outlined. It has been superstitiously asserted that it is the figure of Judas Iscariot, whose sin has led to his being thus pyloried before the eyes of mankind for all generations. The casual onlooker perceives a human face, the eyes, nose, and mouth being fairly conspicuous. Great hopes were originally entertained that with increase of telescopic power would come evidences that the moon was inhabited by intelligences whose works would become manifest. It is doubtful whether any telescope that has already been constructed, or ever will be, can show the moon's surface better than it would be seen with the unassisted eye at a distance of 200 miles. A structure as large as the Liberal Arts Building at the World's Fair would be readily made out, if of a different color from the soil on which it was built. No details of the architecture could be distinguished, and one would never know whether it was a formation of nature or a structure erected by intelligent beings. It has been said that the moon produces blindness by shining upon a sleeper's eyes, that it fixes the hour of death which occurs at the change of tide, that cucumbers, radishes, and turnips increase at full moon, that onions thrive best after the moon has passed its full, that vines trimmed at night when the moon is in the sign of the lion are safe from field mice. The full moon is said to clear away clouds. It is hard to see how a body which sends us so minute a quantity of heat can have any appreciable effect upon the clouds. Perhaps by showing their thinness and making plain the rifts which exist in them, the moon gets the credit of thinning them. Here's what I don't understand. This says moon shadow on the earth as seen from the moon. This is literally a picture that NASA claims to have taken on the moon. What am I looking at? I don't understand. This book is from 1896. What's incredibly interesting, though, is look at the continents. They're set up totally differently than how they show us today. It's like one giant continent, all connected. This is apparently a picture of Mars, Venus. This is supposedly projections on Mars's polar cap. This is supposedly a close-up of a comet. It is well known that in past centuries, comets were objects of superstitious terror not only to the ignorant, but even to the higher classes of society. The comet of 1528 is thus described by Ambrose Paré. This comet was so horrible, so frightful, and it produced such great terror in the vulgar that some died of fear and others fell sick. It appeared to be of excessive length and was of the color of blood. At the summit of it was seen the figure of a bent arm, holding in its hand a great sword, as if about to strike. At the end of the point there were 3 stars. On both sides of the rays of this comet were seen a great number of axes, knives, blood-colored swords, among which were a great number of hideous human faces with beards and bristling hair. And here we have a meteorite seen July 27th, 1894. If it were possible to survey the sidereal universe from without, as now we look at the Hercules cluster, would it too appear to be globular? The first fact to be considered is that the vast majority of the stars lie in the Milky Way, which forms a girdle around the celestial sphere. Now, if we were near the center of a spherical cluster like that in Hercules, throughout which the stars were distributed with any approach to uniformity, they would appear to be about equally numerous in whatever direction we looked. There would be no point within the sphere from which the vast majority of the surrounding stars would have the appearance of a ring like the galaxy. We therefore reject the hypothesis of sphericity and try again. There is a persistent idea that there exists a central sun about which all the starry hosts move obediently in vast cycles of time, but the motions of the stars are so complex that no one can hope to locate a point about which all the bodies in the universe revolve. So this goes back to what I was saying about how I feel like I was picking up in scripture that Polaris, like the throne room, is the real sun. If the Creator spoke the universe into existence, may he not speak it out of existence when once it was fulfilled his purposes? But let us call a halt ere we wander further in paths of groundless and fruitless speculation. We may rest in the assurance that he who has controlled the worlds for ages past still holds them in the hollow of his hand and orders their destinies aright. Radiant suns are not needed to shed light and heat upon the city beautiful, whose walls are jasper and whose gates are pearl, for the glory of God doth lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof.